Hello, my name is Jitters, and welcome back to another episode of Why Everybody Plays. A series of mine where I talk about the agents in Valorant with the highest play rates and try to explain why those agents are played so often. Last week I put out a poll for which agent you guys wanted to see me talk about next, and Omen was the winner. So today I'll be talking about why everybody plays Omen. Usually in these videos I start off by talking about an agent's weaknesses, but the points I wanted to talk about for Omen aren't really weaknesses. Because honestly, Omen doesn't really have any weaknesses. These points are more about why I think he isn't as strong as he once was when he was the undisputed best controller in the game. But it's not because of anything wrong with him, but from shifts in the meta. The first point I wanted to bring up is that he isn't as versatile as he used to be. Back when the only controllers in the game were Viper, Brim, and Omen, Omen was clearly the strongest pick. He was the best at smoking in the game because he had the most range and regenerating smokes, which made him pretty much the only real option. But since then we've had the maps Icebox and Breeze introduced into the game, and Omen just can't really smoke those maps effectively. And I think that as more maps like Breeze and Icebox get introduced, Omen's gonna start to see less and less play. Another big issue with Omen is that he's been receiving nerf after nerf over the last year, to the point where he isn't really as strong as he used to be. His first big nerfs came in patch 2.0 where his flash got a huge cost increase from 200 credits to 400 credits. And his smokes got a huge projectile speed nerf, losing about a third of their speed. This was a hit but didn't really kill the agent. Yes, players would have to buy less on save rounds if they wanted a full buy, and it was harder for him to reactively smoke the whole map, but he was still a pretty strong agent. His next nerfs came in the episode 3 patch in the ability Apocalypse, where most agents had huge nerfs. After this patch, Omen now has to spend 150 credits for each of his teleports instead of 100, and he now only starts with one free smoke and has to buy the other one for 100 credits. And the cooldown was increased by 5 seconds. But hey, at least his flash had a price decrease to 300 credits. Really, a full buy on Omen only costs 100 more credits than before, which really isn't that bad. But the issue is that his relative power to other agents has gone down a lot. In the same time, we've had a new agent in Astra get released, who's arguably just as strong as Omen in coordinated team play, if not stronger. Brim has had an increase in his range of his smokes, as well as an increased duration on them, a decrease in price to his molly, a rework on his stim pack so that he throws it right away. And in the ability Apocalypse of episode 3, the only change to Brim was a 50 credit increase to his molly. And Viper has gotten an insane amount of buffs in the last year. I'm talking her mollies making enemies vulnerable, allowing her to leave her ult for 15 seconds without it going away, decay no longer affecting her teammates, her poison stays up for a couple seconds after Viper dies, instantly damaging enemies who touch her toxin for 30 damage. So now Omen is no longer the only real option in the controller slot. Not to mention, some of these controllers straight up do way better than him on certain maps, just kind of taking the spotlight away from him. For example, Viper, who's better than him on Breeze and Icebox. So the days of being able to auto-lock Omen right away on every single map and it being the strongest pick are kinda gone. The last thing I wanted to mention about Omen is that his ultimate is honestly underwhelming. Now I'm not saying it's useless, because I know a lot of people are going to argue with me about how Omen's ult's actually really strong and underrated. So I'm going to start by talking about what you can do with it. It's good for getting information by TPing where you think an enemy is. You can use it to confuse enemies on a push while defending because it forces enemies to look for you. You can use it to mess with other agents' ultimates. For example, you can ruin a Cypher ult by muffling the map before it goes off. And you can also TP out of a Killjoy ult right before it goes off and then cancel to confuse enemies and get free kills. You can use it for a fast rotate. For example, if you see all enemies on A site, you can have your Omen quickly ult to B and plant the bomb for free and then get into an aggressive position. The goal of the ult is to really mind game the enemy team and cause a lot of commotion. So yes, there are a lot of good uses for the ult, but answer this question for me. If your team had a free ult orb and no one on your team had their ults, would you want Omen to pick up that orb? The answer is probably not. Just compare his ult to other controllers. Brim drops a giant laser from the sky, dealing 7,000 damage per second. Astra puts up a giant wall of cosmic energy that enemies can't shoot through, see through, or even hear through. And Viper's Pit is literally a free round win if you get it off on attack. Here's another fun fact. When the game was in beta, you couldn't cancel Omen's ult. Did you hear what I just said?
You couldn't cancel his ult.
If you ulted and an enemy was next to you, you had to just sit there and wait until you died. What the hell was Riot thinking? How could they think that was even in the same realm of power as something like a Viper or Brim ult? Either way, they fixed that issue and it's all better now. And that's all I have to say for this section of the video. Now, I don't want you to think that Omen is useless, because he is by no means useless. You can still carry games on Omen, and people do carry games on Omen. In fact, even after what I've said, I still think that Omen is the best controller in the game, at least in solo queue. So with that being said, it's time for me to talk about all of his strengths. The first strength I wanted to talk about is that Omen is one of the best lurkers in the game. Lurking is a very strong tactic in Valorant when it's done right. It allows the lurker to pick off rotators, to feed information to their team about where the enemies are rotating from, and is something that everyone should take the time to learn how to do properly. Of course, some agents are better at lurking than others, and Omen is such a strong agent at it because his utility allows him to still provide value for his team from anywhere on the map. For example, if your team is pushing A on ascent, you can still smoke for them to allow them to execute on site. You can lurk mid, and if anything goes wrong, you can use your ult to get back to your team if you need to. Another big strength of Omen's is his blind. There are currently only 2 agents with blinds in the game, Reyna and Omen. And Omen's is definitely the strongest. It has a large AoE, goes through walls, it blinds and deafens enemies, and the effects last like 3 seconds. His flash can be used to help your team clear pretty much half of a site without really risking dying. For example, if you're attacking A site on ascent, you can flash gen, which is a common place for enemies to hold, and you can pretty much guarantee that anyone standing there is not going to be able to dodge it. Another strength of Omen's is that he's the best controller in the game if your team wants to play a slower game where you play a default a lot on T side. The only other agent that comes close is Astra, but she has to sacrifice her other utility if she wants to do that since she only has 5 stars around. Besides that, you can't really default with the Viper because if you throw down her wall, it's stuck there for the rest of the round. And Brim only has 3 smokes for an entire round, so in theory you could default with him, but his kit is really more suited for a team that wants to site execute and then play post plants with his 3rd smoke, molly, and ultimate. The 4th reason why Omen has such a high pick rate is that he's one of the best solo queue agents in the game. This is because of how self-sufficient he is. He can smoke for himself and his team, he can flash for himself, and he has the tools to be able to win aim duels. Omen is able to play kind of like a duelist in a lot of ways. One thing he has in common with the other agents I've talked about so far is their ability to play crazy off angles. With Jett, she can updraft to get to these angles and dash away if she misses. With Reyna, she can dismiss away after every kill. And with Omen, he can TP on top of boxes on a lot of the maps and play pretty much all the same angles that a Jett can. I've been mentioning this point a lot throughout the series so far, and that's for a reason. It really is such a powerful tool to have in an agent's kit. And honestly, I don't think this is the last time I'll be mentioning it. It can give Omen such a huge advantage in gunfights because when enemies are peeking, if they don't expect you to be playing on top of a box, they probably won't be trying to clear you. And this means that their crosshair will likely be way too low and they'll have to make a huge adjustment in order to hit that shot, where you'll probably have your crosshair right where it should be, making your shot way easier to hit than theirs. The last point I wanted to bring up is that Omen is a controller, which is arguably the most important class of agents in the game. I think everyone can agree that when you don't have a controller in a ranked game, your chances of winning go down tremendously. In pretty much every game I've played, someone will always play smokes for the team. Players will literally play a game with 4 duelists as long as the 5th guy plays smokes. And most of the time, Omen is that controller. And honestly, even though I said that other controllers are stronger than Omen on some of the maps, when you're in a solo queue game, Omen feels like the only option. Especially since most players aren't controller mains. And I think that in a lot of games, the person that ends up playing controller is usually filling. Astra feels like you need to be in a 5 stack to even think about playing her. Viper is generally too hard for a player that doesn't take the time to learn how to play her, and if you're filling, you definitely won't pick her. And Brim is 53 years old. Especially since Duelist is the most popular role, it's safe to say that a lot of the time, if they end up filling as a controller, they would likely pick Omen over any of the other agents. This is because again his playstyle is the closest to a duelist, and most people would just be more comfortable on him than the other controllers. Combine that with the fact that most people would think that he's the most fun controller to play and has the highest solo carry potential, it's no surprise that in solo queue you're bound to see an Omen in every game. Plus, Omen was the meta pick for over a year, and most players have practiced him more than any of the other controllers. So most people are just way more comfortable playing Omen, and unless he becomes so weak that he's unplayable, I don't think players are going to stop picking him. So anyways, that's it for this episode of Why Everybody Plays. Leave a comment letting me know what you think, and whether you agree or disagree with anything I've said. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe for more Valorant related content.